I think that I know that um, this day and this moment is part of an unfolding and an evolving, as much as it may feel like it is just about us and just about what we feel right now. And we are a part of something that is unfolding and developing. And our participation, whether we like it or not, is going to count. It's going to count for something. I also want to acknowledge that I see online some dear friends, Reverend Laureen and Reverend DeShannon and Reverend Eileen, my dear Reverend Eugenia, Reverend Jeannie, Aquela, my dear friend Juan Battle, the Reverend Dr. Juan Battle now. So I just want to thank all of you for making the time to be with us today. As I mentioned, when I first spoke in this community, it was on the myth of normal. And if you remember the time of Sandy and the aftermath of Sandy, at least in this area, we were facing what seemed to be an unprecedented moment, or certainly one that had not happened in the Northeast for some time. Some of you may remember gas lines in 2012. There were physical fights and organization according to your license plate as to when you could go and get online to get gas. And nobody seemed to care how much it was at that time. There wasn't an argument about like how much gas was. It was just an argument about, can I get some or not? People living in darkness, in what is supposed to be the evolved world. People living without access to stores, going to stores and empty shelves. And there's something that I just think it's important as part of this unfolding and this evolving. How many times in maybe the last 20 years we have heard the word unprecedented used? Almost to the point that what is unprecedented has now become normal. Yet we are still evolving to have the capacity to be with when the unprecedented happens. And like money, the normal and the unprecedented, and even the seeking of equality makes us first more of who we already are. Because people didn't have to fight in lines for gas 12 years ago, but they did. And the challenges that we face today are not just rooted in the actions of others. They are rooted in who we have been as a humanity, who we are as a humanity, and who we think we might be able to become as a humanity. One of the things that's changed over the past 12 years since I was with you last is that I like to talk now about the gospel according to Merriam-Webster. Because what I find is that principles, ideas, qualities like equality are often best started, the journey may be best started in the dictionary, so that we could get like at least somebody's opinion of a book many of us might have in our homes of what these words actually mean rather than how they are used. So in Merriam-Webster, equality is a noun, and I'm a former English major, so it matters to me that it's a person, place, thing, or idea. but that equality is merely the quality or state of being equal. Which then makes us think, and it's worth inquiring, well, what does it mean to be equal? What's that definition? And there are several, but I want to direct you to the adjectives of equal. So equal can be like in quality, nature, or status. Equal can be like for each member of a group, class, or society. And equal can also be regarding or affecting all objects in the same way. Those are three definitions of equal as an adjective. And so, as we have entered into Black History Month or African American History Month, we're reflecting not just on the idea of equality, but the journey of equality. Because equality is not something, it's something that is maintained or strives to maintain in the natural universe. And our impact on that has thrown the equal way in which the planet manages itself. But that didn't happen on its own. We had something to do with that. So likewise, as we're going through this journey, perhaps we're actually seeking a deeper understanding and experience of this secular idea of equality, but noting the spiritual foundation that's needed in order to live equally. And we sometimes think about these things as separate. Like I have my spiritual life, and then I have the life that I live in the world. And the reality is that your spiritual life gives you who you are being in the natural world. They're not separate. They're impacting each other on a regular basis. And so if we're looking for what there is to do about equality now, then we need to start looking at where are we in our spiritual journey around this idea of equality, because that's going to give us what there is to do, and not so much the other way around. So 3 questions that I'd like you to consider that we'll explore for a couple of minutes. How do you know when you're equal? The first question, how do you know when you're experiencing equality? How do you know? Which leads to the second question, which is who or what are you using as your measure of equality? Who or what are you using as your measure of equality? And then finally, who do you know who isn't equal to you? And what are you doing about it? Because it's one thing to actually know and to notice that there's someone or some group of people who are not equal to you by some measure that you have. And then as a person given by this commitment to everyone being able to live and participate equally, what are you doing about that? Because unfortunately, the bad news in communities like this is that spiritual people don't usually get to rest. We usually don't get to kind of sit on the sideline and be kind of like, oh, well, it's too bad, and wring our hands and throw stuff up in the air and turn the TV off. Because even in your dreams, you can't sleep. You can't rest because you know that there is something going on and there is something to do about it. So it kind of sucks to be us sometimes. Because there are plenty of people who don't care. Sleep well every night. All right for them. But for those of us who have some connection to a concept or a thought or a being that infuses within us and gives us being and ideas and intuition and imagination, then our work just begins in the face of what we commonly call inequality. So the first myth that I'd like to explore is that we are inclined toward equality. That it's kind of like like we're just naturally like looking for ways to be equal. Equality takes work. Lives have been lost through centuries, through the millennia of what we know of human history. There has been a quest for what we now more commonly call equality. And we often kind of refer to these spiritual convictions that we have as this striving to be, like one day I'll be this kind of person, and something that we're trying to accomplish, like one day I'll get there. And there is this acknowledgement that we all fall short. That there is this striving, and we never quite get to what we're striving for, but we strive nonetheless. And even though the principle of equality is noble, it often requires behaviors. There have to be actions. There have to be behaviors that result in equality. So one example that I found that I want to share with you in just religious history is in a book called Philippians. And it's in the New Testament, or the Second Testament, some refer to it as, in this thing called the Bible. And there's a story about Paul, who is in jail at this particular time. He has been jailed for daring to say that there is this guy who has beat death. And if we kind of do like him, we too can beat death. And we can create a society that is for all. So he'd end up in jail behind that. Sound familiar? So while Paul is in jail, he has been one of the people that has founded lots of these little churches, these new things called churches. New, because there weren't a whole lot of churches. But there are these new little communities called churches. And he is writing letters often while he is in jail to either encourage these communities or to give them some advice, give them some thoughts about what he's seen happen and how they might contribute. And he writes this letter to the people of Philippi. And he's trying to encourage them and share with them because he's in jail. And he's noticing, even in his imprisonment, he is experiencing content. And he just wants to share. This is some stuff I noticed. It's kind of like when Oprah says, the thing I know for sure. This is his letter to the people of Philippi. And he says, so if there is any encouragement in Christ, any comfort from love, any participation in the Spirit, any affection and sympathy, complete my joy by being of the same mind, having the same love, being in full accord and of one mind. Do nothing from selfish ambition or conceit, but in humility count others more significant than yourselves. Let each of you look not only to his own interests, but also to the interests of others. I'll read that again. So if there is any encouragement in Christ, any comfort from love, any participation in the Spirit, any affection and sympathy, complete my joy. So I already have experienced this joy from love, from participation, from affection, and from sympathy complete my joy by being of the same mind, having the same love, being in full accord and of one mind. Do nothing from selfish ambition or conceit, but in humility count others more significant than yourselves. And see, in this request from Paul, there is this clear invitation to community. Let us be of one love, let us be of one mind, and let us not enter into activities and convictions that are born of selfish ambition or conceit. And that if we are to create this community, it will require us to be present to love, participation in the Spirit, affection, sympathy, being of the same mind, the same love, being in full accord and of one mind. I have rarely, in my almost 61 years on the planet, fully experienced in large groups of people being of one mind. Doesn't mean that it can't happen, but that's what I'm looking for. That's what I'm working toward. Not just to be comforted myself, but to be more, think about others in humility more significantly than myself. So that when we're taking actions, when we're talking about any of the concerns of the day, it's not just about what's wrong or what would be equal, but what are we concerning ourselves with that, and we're looking at others as more significant than ourselves. Because one of the things that has been happening that's part of our evolution is almost the sickness of our own fascination with our own selves. Babies, infants, are not as fascinated with themselves as we seem to be.
Wow.
And from that self-fascination, sometimes comes those selfish actions and the conceit that blinds us from being able to see how we might be of service and think about others more significantly than ourselves. So it's something for us to work toward. This myth that, we're spiritual people and we believe in equality, that takes work. And like some of the music that we've heard today, it's an inside-out proposition. The second myth is that equality is equity, and that they're the same thing. That equality is equity. And the definitions that I shared with you of equality show us that there's a standard that we're both responding to, but we're also co-creating that simultaneously. So when I asked you to consider, what are you using to measure equality for yourself? That comes from somewhere. You learned that somewhere. You disagreed with what you learned at some point, and it is an ongoing evolution. But for there to be a state where things are like in quality, nature, or status, for there to be a condition where things are like for each member of a group, a class, or society, that lets us know that anything that is not like in quality, nature, or status points to the conditions in society that we have to attend to. Anything that is not like in status, nature, or quality. So when you think about how you're experiencing equality or inequality, what's the measure? What's the litmus test? And sometimes, more prominently today, people talk about being in a state of inequality because they're uncomfortable, because they don't feel good. And I don't disagree with that per se, but dig in a little bit. Because if the full measure of equality is your experience of being comfortable, and not necessarily because there is a difference in group, class, or society, then we have to deal with your discomfort, as well as in the reading that was shared, not just asking for access to racism, but actually dealing with the structures in the 21st century today that give us conditions where there is not equity in quality or status or nature. That's what we have to deal with. So, one of my dear friends, who's not on the call right now, Michael Bennett, about personal relationships, he said this really great thing that has been imparted to me that I love. And he said that people often want what they think they should want in a partner. So, there's always kind of like these lists and what do you want and who are you looking for? And Michael says people a lot of times want what they think they should want because somebody told them that they should want it. And they agreed that they should want it. But then when it gets down to it and love shows up, it doesn't necessarily look like the thing you think you should want. Likewise is the case when we strive for equality. Because if the measure of equality is just your level of comfort, we have no hope. We have no hope of bringing forth a condition of equality if it's based on your feelings. That means that there's a very different work to do. Because if you will, we have gone through human history up to this point where we create laws to bring about conditions that we think are equitable, that will provide equity, but we don't necessarily get agreement on those. And so we're constantly in this pendulum swing where there's some people who say, well, this is what equality looks like. And then there's another group of people that no, it looks like this, and it looks like this, and it looks like this. And we just keep swinging on the same pendulum. Because we haven't quite gotten to that significantly thinking about others more than ourselves. And perhaps that might be the measure of equality. That if we're doing for the least of them, then we are creating a condition for not just equality, but for equity, where everyone gets what they need, not just what is perceived to be fair. Last myth, and I'll sit down because the other thing I learned from 12 years ago is I talk too long. So, this third and final myth is that someone else will create the equality we seek. Somebody's going to take care of it. Somebody's going to come, something's going to happen. Somebody's going to come in and just take care of all and fix it. Fix all this. And I'd like for you to just kind of engage for me in some imagination. So if you wouldn't mind, if you would just close your eyes for a moment or lower your gaze, whatever is comfortable for you when you are imagining. Bring to mind the people you know who are not experiencing equality at this moment. Bring them to mind and look at their faces. And now bring to mind the people who you may not know personally, and you know they are not experiencing equality. And let's add another dimension to bring to mind the places in your life where you're not experiencing equality. And now give yourself permission to consider what is there to do. And also consider of what there is to do, what is yours to do. What is yours to do? And as you're comfortable, open your eyes and come back to a place of presence to this moment. I invite you to consider this exercise daily, not just for Black History Month, but every day, where the condition of the equality of humanity, of creation, remains out of balance. Equality is like a banquet. There's always plenty to do. There's always plenty to do. And it may not seem like the thing that's yours to do is big enough to make a difference. But without your making a difference, the full difference can't be made. There's some actions that we're going to take collectively, but those actions are often given by what we decide to do individually, by the actions that we take individually. And I'd like to leave you just with this idea. When you think about what is yours to do, what is it that you believe or are guided by or inspired by that whispers to you of what's yours to do? Because I'm of the mind, and I have been for some time. Sometimes we say, oh, I just don't know what to do. Kind of like, do you remember that dream you had? Do you remember that thought that just kind of like keeps coming back to you and you don't know why? It's kind of like all of a sudden taking another route to work that you've never taken before, but you just feel led to do. We're in a time where we have to follow our intuition. We have to take action on not just what we know to do, but what we think might be helpful. And the time is now. Because in another body of work I participated in, nobody else is coming. Nobody else is coming. It's us. We are the ones we've been waiting for. We are the ones we've been waiting for. And so I encourage you, use this Black History Month, use this African American History Month as a place to perhaps focus, but not to be limited by. Because the history of creation is calling to us. And we better have a good reason not to pick up that phone. Thank you all so much. God bless you.
If you like this video, please like us on YouTube, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and click on the bell to be notified whenever we post a new video. Thank you.